Welcome back to Fine Tuning with Drew Taylor, your one-stop shop when it comes to animation news and commentary. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and Mr. Taylor, whose writings on the industry you can regularly read over on The Wrap, and whose musings on the Mission Impossible movies you can listen to on Light the Fuse, the official Mission Impossible podcast. He and I are recording this week's show on Sunday, June 23rd, 2024. And given that we talked on last week's show about how Inside Out 2 had overperformed at the box office, how this Kelsey Mann movie was only supposed to make 85 million, maybe 90, over its opening weekend in North America, and wound up selling 154 million worth of tickets. What did you think of what happened this weekend, Drew? Because, again, it was only supposed to, it was projected, 85 again, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you've been watching this, Jim, throughout the week, though, but it was like, the biggest Tuesday of all time, the biggest Wednesday of all time. And
I'm honest.
So this weekend, what did it make? More than it made over 100 million again. That's insane.
Yeah. Now, I have to say this. Okay, what's going on here, Drew? I don't. It's hard for me to recall an animated film overperforming like this. I mean, certainly over the past 5 years or so. And look, I mean this in the kindest possible way. I mean, Inside Out 2 is a solid sequel. I mean, it's not exactly a groundbreaking film. I mean, it's I wouldn't group it with, say, a Toy Story 2 or a Toy Story 3, where the sequel, for my money anyway, was actually better than the original. So what happened here? I mean, people just hungry for entertainment? I mean, how is this happening?
They love it. I don't know. I mean, it's something that everybody can go see. There hasn't really been a new kids movie since Kung Fu Panda 4. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was Garfield at the beginning of or the middle of May, but that didn't quite do as well as people thought. I thought it was going to do better, actually. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, from Memorial Day to the 4th, this is literally the only family movie. And I just saw that it has made 725 million globally in 12 days.
Yeah. I mean,
that is insane. Well, it's insane.
It's already the highest grossing film of the year. In fact, you mentioned the 725 million. That puts it past the 711 million that Dune 2 made at the worldwide box office this year. But that said, Despicable Me 4, which, again, you just alluded to, that Inside Out 2 has a clear runway until the 3rd, which is when this Illuminations movie debuts in stateside theaters. But it just this past weekend opened in Australia, Argentina, New Zealand, and Uruguay. And the trays are already reporting that it's outpacing ticket sales for any of the previous installments of this film franchise. I guess 9.4 million in ticket sales just in those 4 markets. So it's by the way, do you want to tell people the story you shared with me when you walked out of the Despicable Me 4 screening at Annecy? Because I'm beginning to think.
I turned to the person I was with. Yeah, and I said 1.5 billion global. There we go. That was my
Okay, somebody get that chiseled in stone, because I have an uneasy feeling, Drew, that you are very right. I mean, if you look at what Inside Out 2 has done in just 12 days, it's hard to imagine what Despicable Me 4 will do over the course of this summer. So long story short, folks, lots of happy people in corner offices at Disney and NBC Universal. And by the way, speaking of Annecy, there's more news that came out of France, which we'll talk about in a moment. But first, I want to remind you that Fine Tuning is brought to you by Touring Plans. And if you're headed down to Central Florida anytime soon to sample one of the theme parks, or some of the theme parks that can be found around the city beautiful, well, Touring Plans can help you save time. More importantly, can help you save money as you wander around Walt Disney World and the Universal Orlando Resort. Please check them out at touringplans.com. Okay, now back to France and Annecy. And last week, Drew was kind enough to walk us through all of the news he had about the animated features he learned about while he was hanging out lakeside. I want to take a moment here to talk about some of the TV stuff that has since been announced. So, a Gravity Falls revival? Really? It is now. This info comes by way of an interview from the Direct that was done with Executive Vice President of Television Animation and Disney Branded Television. This is Meredith Roberts. And she mentioned that they've been talking with Alex Hirsch, the creator of Gravity Falls, and about this possibility. And here's the quote. It said, we've been in conversations with Alex, and he's about to publish a book with Disney on this production. And we've done some shorts. So never say never. And now... Again, want to allude to what Meredith just mentioned there, the book. This is the Book of Bill, right? I mean, basically the story of Bill Cipher, which is coming out from Hyperion Avenue next month, in fact, on July 23rd. And have to remind people who haven't seen Gravity Falls in a while that Bill Cipher was a pretty scary character. And in fact, what's interesting is on the front of this book, there's actually a warning that this 208-page hardcover covers travels to dimensions meant for older readers. So, and by the way, while we're plugging books, want to remind people that the art and making of Ultraman comes out from Titan Books in December of this year, and likewise the art of Amphibia. That's March 25th, 2025. And hey, those two are written by my co-host, Drew Taylor. Go figure.
There you go. Go pre-order them now.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what do you think of this news about a possible Gravity Falls revival?
I think that is not something that's going to happen in the immediate future, if at all. Mm-hmm. And not only because, Jim and I were pre-gaming before, and, it wasn't the most amicable split between Alex and Disney. Obviously, they have worked together since on a number of things, but it was not... I think they wanted more. I think he was totally drained. And, and he's got some really exciting stuff on the horizon that I have recently heard about that I cannot talk about yet, but he's, deep in work over at Netflix. So it would take an act of God or the devil, Jim, to get him back, I think.
Interesting.
Maybe Bill Cipher could assist, but yeah.
Well, there we go. Because I guess for me, what was intriguing is that after Gravity Falls wrapped up its 2 seasons at Disney, and again, what was kind of interesting is there was almost a preemptive announcement from Alex in November of 2015, where he got out ahead of the show coming to an end. And here's the quote: "The show isn't being canceled; it's being finished." And the final episode of season 2, Weirdmageddon, Take Back the Falls, what was it? That aired February of the following year, so 2016. And that episode did make a point of sort of leaving the door open for Mabel and Dipper to return to the Mystery Shack at some point. But again, based on what you're saying, this isn't going to happen. Oh, this makes me sad.
I doubt it.
Okay.
I doubt it.
Okay. I mean, but what's also kind of intriguing is when you consider what Gravity Falls covered, and then his next show, the Inside Job, in fact, over at Netflix. He left Disney, got signed for a deal there at August of 2018, and then Inside Job, which it just kind of existed in a parallel dimension to Gravity Falls. It was the government organization that sort of rode herd on cryptozoology and aliens and all sorts of conspiracies.
Yes, although he didn't create that. He was, I think, just more of a shepherd, an a kind and benevolent executive producer on there.
Got it.
But yeah, you're right. It did definitely share some DNA. They were separated at birth, for sure.
Yeah, and that got 2 seasons as well. In fact, second season got announced as being picked up in June of 2022, debuted November of that same year, and then show officially got canceled January of 2023. Now, you mentioned benevolent executive producer and that sort of thing, which you'll see the connective tissue here in a moment, folks, but want to pivot to the other Disney-related news from the television side of things that came out of Annecy, and that's we're getting a new Prep and Landing special.
Yes, we didn't talk about that last week.
No, I mean, just you buried the lead, Drew. I mean, I'm
sorry.
I have been a fan of Prep and Landing since when they debuted this thing. And I want to say they showed it for the very first time to the public in September of 2009 at the very first D23 Expo. And I still remember sitting in that theater. I was there with my friend Angela Ragno, and in fact, I actually credit this for the great relationship I have with Amy Astley, the head of PR at Disney, because I had no idea that sitting directly behind myself and Angela were evidently 3 and 4 members of the production team of this thing. And when it ended, I turned to Angela and I said, "That's the best damn thing I've seen Walt Disney Animation Studio do in years." And they immediately went back to Amy and told her. And then Amy was like, "Hey, Jim, you want to come visit?" But I again, been a fan of Wayne and Landy since the first time I saw this, and if ever anything, again, and it took home 4 Emmys that year, 4 Best Animated Television Production, and it was directed by Kevin Dieters and Stevie Warner Skelton, with Dorothy McKim producing, and they stayed together and produced the shorts. There was the Tiny's Big Adventure, and then there was that little teeny tiny thing that they got Betty White to do the voice of Mrs. Santa Claus on, Operation Secret Santa. And then a year later, in December of 2011, we got the official sequel, Prep and Landing, Naughty versus Nice, and that took home 4 Annies. But it was interesting. Every time I saw Kevin and Stevie since, it's like, where's the other one? I thought you said there'd be more. And it's like, well, we talked about it and nothing ever happened. And now, correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin and Stevie, they wound up in charge of season 2 of Monsters at Work, right? In fact, that's what's kind of interesting about the Snowball Protocol, because they're not directing this one, but they are serving as executive producers, and it's a Shane Zalin who's going to be directing this time around. So, what did you hear over at Annecy about this one?
Well, just that it's not for this year. Mm-hmm. It's for next year, because both animation studios are sweating profusely trying to get Moana 2 done.
Okay.
But I believe it's called the Snowball Protocol. Is that what the name of it is?
And the what is it?
Yeah.
Do you have the bullet point thing there, or?
I have the bullet point is when their holiday mission goes awry, Wayne thinks he is in big trouble with Santa, which opens a vault of merry mishaps from the past. It's going to be hard to dig their way out of the snowbank this time in Prep and Landing, the Snowball Protocol. So how do you feel about that, Jim?
I again, anything that puts me back in the world of Prep and Landing, and again, my good friend Angela, to this day, when she's in a frustrating situation, her swear du jour is frostbite. So I mean, I it's been too long. I mean, 2011 to 2025 is a long time, but I'll take it. In fact, also what's especially interesting is that there's a brand, they've done a nighttime projection show for the holidays for the Disney Hollywood Studios called Jingle Bam, that keys off of the Prep and Landing films, and evidently a brand new version, updated version of that nighttime show is debuting at Disney's Hollywood Studios this year as part of the second edition of Jollywood Nights. So I'm going to be kind of intrigued to see what they do with that. And more to the point, are we going to see anything from the upcoming special? Or for that matter, will the cliffs from the Snowball Protocol be folded into this nighttime show in the future? But all right, anyway.
Yeah, I wonder if they are. I wonder if they're big players on Disney Plus, and that is the reason for the revival. Because I think they do play them. I think on ABC every year, but I don't know. I'm sure that the data that they can get from Disney Plus is much more equivocal in terms of moving the needle and greenlighting a second one. Or a third one in this case. Yeah.
That is an excellent point. Okay, now, continuing on and sort of toggling back to some of the stuff that Drew shared on last week's show, you got to see about 20 minutes of The Wild Robot, and it got huge reaction at the show. So we've just now learned that it's going to have its world premiere September. Is that correct? At the Toronto Film Festival?
September,
Yeah.
I think they named like 6 movies that are going to be there, and Wild Robot is one of the very first. So, yeah, planting the flag. You love to see it.
Okay. Now, you got to see the unfinished version of this film last week, right?
I did. I don't know how much I am allowed to say, or if I could even say that. I've seen it. Yeah. And I think you should all be very excited. I think. Yeah,
okay.
That's what I will say.
Okay, then
I see a red dot from the DreamWorks.
There we go. All right. We'll back away slowly then. Okay.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we always love to hear what Leica is up to, and they've now got a film to follow up the stop motion project that's coming out next year, right?
Well, you know what? So Wildwood is coming out next year. I've heard that The Night Gardener, which we've talked about before, Jim, that's their adult animated feature. I've heard that's entirely been storyboarded. So I think that this is 3 down the road.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well,
yeah.
Look, the fact that Leica has 3 films, in various stages of production makes me happy no matter what. All right, that's cool news. Now, also, you had mentioned when you were doing your dive for animation news this week that we now have a trailer for season 2 of Star Trek Prodigy.
Yes. I
have to admit, I love the 2 Star Trek animated, whether it's Lower Deck or Prodigy, and they've both been so enjoyable. But of course, one's hand drawn, one's CG. What did you think of the trailer for season 2?
I thought it looks very charming. I mean, we've talked about this in the past, and we're just happy that the show is surviving. It's making the jump from Paramount Plus to Netflix. Hopefully, there will be further seasons beyond this one, but. If you haven't watched Prodigy, it's really, really fun, and it's got a great look, I think. One of the best looking CG animated shows out there. So,
yeah.
And it's great.
Yeah, okay. Now, speaking of new things, well, again, this is debuting. Obviously, Star Trek Prodigy is making its debut on Netflix. On the other hand, a whole new channel, Me Toons, we now have a programming schedule for this. And definitely, well, again, we've talked about this on the show. This is a celebration of basically animation's past. And you've looked over the schedule. Is there a show you're particularly looking forward to? Or?
Well, it's interesting because it's kind of splitting the difference between Cartoon Network and Boomerang, which I don't think is Boomerang even around anymore, Jim. Or
it is so.
Is that something?
No. Nancy actually had it on just the other night, and it was one of these things where it was honestly the worst Flintstone episode I've ever heard in my entire life. I mean, I was working, so I had it on basically as radio while Nancy was watching this. And it was basically Fred had managed to help Barney lose his job. And he and Betty had no food in the house. And Fred felt bad. And it was like... And again, it's 1960s writing, so it's taking 5 minutes to get to this point. So,
yeah. I mean, what's there is Woody Woodpecker, Popeye, Mr. Magoo, Tom and Jerry, Jetsons meets Flintstones. There's a Flintstones Family Sunday block plus Scooby-Doo Sunday specials. But we're very excited about this because our friend Jerry Beck is very involved.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it'll be good. I think I'm not totally familiar with MeTV. Is it a actual linear channel or is it a fast channel on like Roku?
I want to say it's more of a Roku thing because I remember Nancy actually had to buy I want to say a physical antenna to be able to watch this.
Okay.
And MeTV is a lot of black and white television from the 50s and the 60s. But again, Nancy and I are old, so we enjoy this stuff. But yeah, so this is an interesting companion to this, and it will be going forward. It'll just be interesting to see what bubbles up over here. And speaking of interested to see what will bubble up, we have a new head of Netflix animation, Hannah Mingla.
Minghella, Jim.
Sorry,
come on.
Okay.
Daughter of Anthony Minghella, who wrote The Storyteller and directed Talented Mr. Ripley.
There we go.
Very talented family. Yes.
Okay, so face it, Netflix is already in an interesting moment. Animation-wise, I mean, they if you think about the films that have debuted over there, how well they've done when award season rolls around, that sort of thing. So, what do you see? What do you think the potential here is with someone like Hannah now in charge of this arm of Netflix?
Well, it's interesting because she is taking over two people's jobs. She's doing animation and family live action films. So that is somewhat worrisome. But, she used to run Columbia at Sony, and right before this, she was at J.J. Abrams' Bad Robot. So she certainly got the resume, and I've actually talked to one filmmaker over there who seems very excited to have her there. So, I mean, that's good to know. But... yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, all of Netflix film with Dan Lin being installed as the head of that is going through some challenges. So I feel optimistic. I mean, they've got a great slate of projects this year and beyond. So I think we just got to sit back and see what happens. But yeah.
Okay. Well, all right. So that does it for the news end of things. Now, I'll remind you at the top of the show today, we mentioned Drew and I are recording on June 23rd, but the day before, June 22nd, very significant to animation fans because back in 1988, that's when Who Framed Roger Rabbit came out. And when we get back, Drew and I are going to talk about the Toontown scene from that film. But first, this. And we're back. All right. So, Drew, let's talk about Roger Rabbit. All right. First time, when did you first get to see Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Oh, I don't know if I even saw it in I don't think I saw it in the theater. I think I saw it on home video because I was pretty young. I was born in '83.
Okay.
So
okay.
Yeah, but I mean, I just remember. You know what I remember, Jim, is that there was a promotion at Disney World for a spring break. Event that had Roger with a flag, and I remember somebody handing me a button with that because he was so instantly absorbed into the parks.
Oh, totally.
Yeah,
I mean, that was the thing, and that gives you some idea of how bad things were at Disney at that time. I mean, mind you, Michael's only been there for 4 years at this point, but. They were desperate for new characters. And more to the point, Roger was a project that was fairly far along in development at Disney at that point. But the previous management, in fact, announced it, showed test clips on a Disney Studio showcase that aired on the Disney Channel. But they just could not, seal the deal, so to speak, get it going. But I guess the part of the story that I also find fascinating is that if we take a step back to 1988, at this point, Amblin and Disney are very much in direct competition. In fact, that November, on the very same day, November 18th, 1988, Land Before Time and Oliver and Company went out into theaters. In fact, again, that's Universal releasing Land Before Time and Disney releasing Oliver and Company, with all of the promotional might of those two studios behind them. And in the end, it was Land Before Time, the Bluth film, that came out on top. It made $35.4 million at the domestic box office, where Oliver and Company came up short. It was $35.1 million. So the Spielberg film made $400,000 more than Disney in stateside theaters, and Steven took out full-page ads in all of the trades to brag about that, which is, I guess, for me, kind of ironic, because if you think about it, one of the main reasons that Michael Eisner got the job as the head of Disney in September of '84 is it was Lucas and Spielberg who called members of the Disney board that summer, the summer of '84, and basically told them, look, we've worked with Michael while he's over at Paramount, and we will work with him if you hire him at Disney. And sure enough, Spielberg was good as his word, that when Michael did get installed as the head of Disney, one of the very first projects they turned the key on was Roger Rabbit. And what had previously tripped up the film was that they weren't able to get the rights to any other characters other than Disney's. And it was Spielberg that he went to Warner's, and what was it? For $10,000 a piece, he got Bugs and Daffy and Yosemite Sam, and am I remembering that correctly, Drew? Or
yeah, something insane like that. Although there were caveats, right? That they had to each have the same number of lines,
yes,
and things like that.
Yes,
yeah.
They literally had to have the exact same amount of dialogue that their Disney equivalents had. On the other hand, there was some bad feeling over at Paramount, because when Eisner left, he took a number of key Paramount executives, including Jeffrey Katzenberg, with him. So there were scenes written for Who Framed Roger Rabbit that it featured Popeye and Casper. And Paramount refused to give Disney the rights. It's like, no, pound sand. But the other thing worth mentioning here, I think anyway, is that Spielberg was happy to work with Michael Eisner to help make Who Framed Roger Rabbit happen. On the other hand, he wasn't convinced that Disney was up to the task, Disney feature animation. So you've heard the story about him going to Don Bluth, right? And offering him the job to handle animation for Roger Rabbit?
No, I haven't heard that. And I certainly didn't read about it in Don Bluth's riveting autobiography where he talks about sharing a bathtub with his entire family. But yeah.
All right. We'll have to tie him down and get the real stories at some point.
Yes, yeah.
But anyway, Richard Williams wound up being the default candidate. But what I want to talk about today is, again, Roger Rabbit was a really important film that started off, I want to say, with a $25 million budget, and over time grew to a $40 million budget. So getting promotional partners with this project was crucial. So Disney had lined up McDonald's as well as New Coke, and had ads made with the animation from the film to help sell these particular products. But again, McDonald's and and New Coke were like, and this movie will open in theaters on June 22nd, 1988. And it's like, absolutely. Because it's like, look, we're going to have our ads ready. And this is non-negotiable. But here's the thing. The animators in London, they fell behind, which Drew will tell you happens on animated films. I mean, especially in the early days of production, the animators are actually learning how to animate the characters. And over time, as they work on the films, they get better and better and faster. And you eventually get more footage out of these animators, but they were just having trouble with Roger Rabbit. And there's Don Hahn tells this story about how they were so far behind at one point and this would have been October, November of 87, where basically Katzenberg insisted on a meeting. And so he flew out from LA to New York, and Don Hahn and Richard Williams flew out from London to New York, and I want to say they were at Disney corporate headquarters. And in fact, I think Don tells this story in his memoir, Hot Dogs Dancing in the Night. That's the real title, by the way. That Katzenberg basically leads Don over to the window and points down to the street, and there's a bunch of guys repairing potholes, shoveling asphalt. And he's basically, look, if this movie doesn't make it, we don't make our delivery day. That's your next job. You never make another movie. But what was frustrating to the filmmakers is that, for example, they put all of this effort and all of this time into, well, have you ever seen any of the footage from the pighead scene? Oh
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so you know the one I'm talking about, where Eddie is basically sneaking around backstage at the Ink and Paint Club and gets caught by the bouncer. And the next thing you know, I mean, it's this amazing scene that, in fact, what's interesting is it shows up. It was cut so late, it turns up in the novelization and the picture book. But basically, Eddie gets kidnapped by the Weasels and taken to Toontown. Where you got to remember his brother died because a piano was dropped on him. So, and then you get to basically see the next morning, Eddie is chased out of the tunnel leading to Toontown, only he's now got a cartoon pig's head pulled over his head and he can't get it off. And I mean, this thing was fully animated and moved with Bob Hoskins as he turned his head, and eventually he makes his way back to his office. And I want to say he scrubs it off with turpentine. And in fact, that's why when you watch the finished film, you have what is it? Jessica Rabbit is in Eddie's office, and he's stepping out of the bathroom with no shirt on, because he's literally just come out of the shower after scrubbing off this pig's head, which, by the way, you've seen the little chunks of footage that have actually made this out from it. That you've seen the thing where like the pig's face is going around the drain.
Yes, yes. It's horrifying, but I think it's on most of the special features of the home video releases. Yeah.
But for the animators, what infuriated them is they put so much time, so much effort into the scene because it was going to be a big part of the movie. In fact, that was you had to see Eddie frightened of Toontown because that moment where he makes the decision with to actually go into Toontown and try to rescue Roger, he's got the Toon gun. The feeling was this isn't going to work unless we have that earlier scene. So they put all this time, all this effort, it gets cut. And meanwhile, again, they've now only got, what is it, 5 months, 6 months to deliver the finished animation for this film to make its June 22nd debut. So this is where Dale Bear Studios comes in. And Dale Bear, we lost Dale in January of 2001, but I know you got to interview him a bunch of times because he actually went back to Disney and
Yeah.
he worked on Princess and the Frog. He did, in fact, he did an amazing job with Alameda Slim in Home on the Range, and I'm trying to remember who was his character in the Winnie the Pooh movie? Who did he do there?
Oh God, I talked to him for Winnie the Pooh. That was like a murderer's row. Was he Owl? Let me look. Dale Bear, Winnie the Pooh.
Owl. It says here he did Owl.
Owl. Okay, there you go. There you go.
But yeah, no, he just did so much great stuff, and I also helped out Sergio Pablos with Dr. Doppler on Treasure Planet. I mean, just an amazing animator. But at this point, he had stepped away from Disney and had set up his own animation studio with his then wife Jane. And this was the thing. Here was Disney staring down the barrel of we need to finish Roger Rabbit. We need to make that June 22nd date. And the only way we're going to do this is if we have outside help. But this is an important movie for us. This is the movie that tells everybody that Disney is back. And so they go to negotiate the deal with Dale. And it just basically, look, we need your help. And when we said we need your help, we need you to basically do almost the entire Toontown scene from this movie. But you can't tell anybody you're doing it. In fact, for me, that's the fascinating part of watching the Who Framed Roger Rabbit credits that you get to almost the literal end of this. There's a credit that comes up that says additional animation. And it mentions that the head of the supervising animator on this was Dale Bear. But if you think about it, what's the scene that people talked about when they walked away from this movie? It's like, oh my God, Toontown was amazing. And to get to see the Seven Dwarfs and Snow White and all of the characters and that crazy world. And that was Dale. Dale stepped in there and did that. And do you remember anything from your conversations with Dale? Did you guys ever talk about that, or?
I never talked about it. I mean, I think it was a secret for the most part. I mean, but yeah, you're right. We lost a Titan when we lost Dale. I mean, everybody loved him, and he created so much amazing work.
No,
but
totally.
Yeah, I mean that. You're right that the Diet Coke commercial, was there alongside the movie, and it was all new animation. It was not. They did custom stuff for that, which was pretty amazing.
It was. But again, it was also new Coke, so it was terrible. But yeah, I mean, but Dale had been at Disney since 73. I mean, he worked on Robin Hood, and what's kind of interesting is that he helped with the visual development on Zootopia and Moana. And last credit for him. In fact, this was released after we lost him. The Bob's Burgers movie, which. Again, I think a lot stronger than people want to acknowledge. I enjoy the hell out of it.
It's great. It's great. Yeah.
So. Well, anyway, so long story short, Dale and his team, in relative secrecy, do what they do with Toontown. It becomes the breakout scene for the movie, and that's how we got, for example, the two lands, the Mickey's Toontown at Disney Park in Anaheim, and likewise Tokyo Disneyland. Also, just recently, and remind me, Drew, I'll send you the art for this, the very first version of the Fantasia Gardens miniature golf course at Walt Disney World was supposed to be Toontown.
Oh.
There's this amazing piece of concept art for it, but by then Spielberg and Disney were having their falling out over Roger Rabbit, and to this day, there's just, if they had just figured that out, we would have gotten that Roger Rabbit sequel. We would have gotten more shorts. I mean, it wouldn't have come to an end with Trail Mix-Up. I don't know. Is that a bad thing? Is that a good thing?
I mean, I think the world we'd be better with more Roger Rabbit in it, but
Yeah.
that's what I think, Jim.
Okay. So, all right. Well, anyway, folks, that brings us to the end of this week's fine tuning. But if you want more Drew Taylor related goodness, well, again, you don't just have to buy his wonderful forthcoming books, The Art of Amphibia and The Art and Making of Ultraman. There's also his wonderful Light the Fuse, the official Mission Impossible podcast, which he does with Charles Hood. So now I know you've been marching through some of the great filmmakers over at Paramount. You guys were going to be taking a break for a bit. Are we still doing that? Or
yeah, we are, but we'll be releasing episodes from the vault. So fear not, there will be new Light the Fuse, or at least repurposed Light the Fuse stuff coming out soon. So yeah.
All right.
What about you, Jim? Tell us everything.
Well, again, we got podcasts. Oh, have we got podcasts? We got Disney Dish that I do with Len Testa. I am recording a brand new episode of Looking at Lucasfilm later tonight with Brian Gahn, providing the tornadoes that have been coming through don't carry the house off to Oz. Let's see. Also, you recently recorded a new Epic Universal podcast with Eric Hersey, who edits and produces a lot of the shows here. Likewise, his lovely bride, Lauren Hersey, and I have done a new I Want That Too, where we brought in Noah Valladolid to talk about his Oswald collection, which is crazy vast. And Noah, by the way, is doing a new podcast, Manufacturing the Magic, with his lovely bride Shelley, which talks about theme park history. And then, of course, there's Len and my video project, Disney Unpacked, which we're doing with Jim Schul. This past month, we've been looking at Mater's Junkyard Jamboree. In July, we'll be taking an in-depth look at how Paradise Pier was transformed into Pixar Pier. And I think that does it. So, all right, before Mr. Taylor and I head out the door here, want to ask a favor. If you could please head over to Apple Podcasts and rate and review, not just the show you're listening to right now, Fine Tuning, but also Light the Fuse, the official Mission Impossible podcast. That would be very helpful. And let's see, we also are supposed to mention the social media stuff. So, Drew, where can folks find you there?
Drew Tailored, like a tailored shirt, on Instagram and Twitter, and everywhere else. And what about you, Jim?
Also on Twitter, Instagram as Jim Hill Media, and over on Facebook as Jim Hill Media News. And so, all right, that's it for this week, folks. And on behalf of Mr. Taylor, I want to thank you for listening, and we will be back soon.